You know that feeling when someone you love most looks at you like you've completely lost your mind? Well, picture this. I'm standing in my kitchen holding my university acceptance letter with shaking hands, and my 23-year-old daughter Emma bursts out laughing. Not the good kind of laughter, the kind that cuts right through you. Mom, seriously, you're 56 years old. Don't you think it's a little late for this whole college thing? She didn't even look up from her phone as she said it, scrolling through whatever was more important than her mother's dreams at that moment. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but something deeper stirred inside me. You see, I'd spent the last 35 years raising 3 kids, working dead-end jobs to keep food on the table after their father walked out when Emma was just 2. I'd given up my dream of becoming a social worker back then, convinced myself it was too selfish to pursue education when my babies needed me. But here I was, finally free. My youngest had graduated high school, and for the first time in decades, I could think about what I wanted. The acceptance letter to the local university's social work program felt like a lifeline I'd been waiting for my entire adult life. Emma's laughter still echoed in my ears as I folded that letter carefully and tucked it into my purse. Something shifted in me that day, a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. Maybe she was right to doubt me. Maybe I was too old, too set in my ways, too ordinary. But maybe, just maybe, she was about to learn something about her mother she never knew existed. If you've ever felt like it's too late to chase your dreams, stick around, because what happened next will change everything you think you know about age, determination, and proving people wrong, even when that person is your own child. Walking onto that campus for the first time felt like landing on another planet. Students rushed past me with their energy drinks and backpacks covered in pins, chattering about parties and professors I'd never heard of. I clutched my brand new notebook. Yes, I actually bought a physical notebook while everyone else had laptops, and tried to blend in. My first class was Introduction to Social Work Theory. I arrived 15 minutes early because that's what responsible adults do, right? Wrong. Apparently, showing up early branded me as either the professor or someone's confused grandmother. The looks I got as students trickled in ranged from curious to pitying. "Are you auditing the class?" a sweet girl with purple hair asked me, clearly trying to be helpful. "No, I'm enrolled," I replied, and watched her eyebrows disappear under her bangs. When Professor Martinez walked in, and he looked about 12 years old to me, he started talking about digital natives and generational trauma, like these were concepts everyone just naturally understood. I frantically scribbled notes while kids around me typed faster than I could think. During the break, I called Emma from the bathroom, my voice shaking. "Honey, I think I made a terrible mistake. I don't understand half of what they're saying, and I'm pretty sure I'm older than some of the professors." Her sigh was audible through the phone. "Mom, I told you this was a bad idea. It's not too late to drop out. Nobody would judge you for trying." But something in her tone, that patronizing sweetness you use with children or elderly relatives, lit a fire in my belly. Judge me? I'd survived single motherhood, 3 teenagers, and a decade working 2 jobs simultaneously. I'd figured out how to stretch a dollar until it screamed, and how to be both mother and father when life demanded it. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, gray roots showing, laugh lines deeper than I remembered, but eyes still bright with stubborn determination. "You know what, Emma? I think I'll stick it out a little longer." When I hung up, I didn't know it yet, but I'd just made the decision that would change both our lives forever. 3 weeks into the semester, I still felt like an alien trying to decode human behavior. The students had their own language. They slapped when something was good. Everything was either fire or mid, and they communicated through memes I didn't understand. But something interesting started happening in our discussion groups. While my classmates gave textbook answers about poverty and inequality, I found myself raising my hand with actual stories. When we discussed food insecurity, I didn't quote statistics. I talked about the month I fed my kids pancakes for dinner 3 times a week because flour and milk were all I could afford. "That's wow," said Marcus, a 20-year-old who always wore designer sneakers. "I never thought about it that way." Professor Martinez started calling on me more often. "Sarah, you mentioned last week that you've experienced this firsthand. Can you elaborate?" At first, I was embarrassed. These kids were discussing theories while I was sharing my messy, imperfect life. But slowly, I realized something powerful was happening. My experiences, all those years I thought I was just surviving, were actually knowledge. Raw, unfiltered, real-world knowledge that no textbook could teach. Emma still rolled her eyes whenever I mentioned school. She'd graduated from college 3 years ago with a marketing degree and was working at a startup, making decent money and living her best life. In her mind, I was playing dress-up in a world where I didn't belong. "Mom, you do realize your classmates are younger than I am, right?" she said during our weekly dinner. "Doesn't that feel weird?" "Sometimes," I admitted, stabbing at my salad, "but they're teaching me things too. Did you know there's an app that helps homeless people find available shelter beds, and another one that connects food pantries with surplus groceries?" Emma looked up from her phone for the first time in 20 minutes. "Huh, that's actually pretty cool." It was the first time she'd shown any genuine interest in what I was learning, and I felt a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around my ridiculous decision. I didn't know it then, but that crack was about to become a doorway neither of us expected. Mid-semester, Professor Martinez announced our major assignment: design and implement a community outreach project. While my classmates groaned about the workload, my heart started racing with excitement. This was it, my chance to prove that experience mattered as much as youth. Most students chose safe, theoretical projects: create awareness campaigns, design surveys, write policy proposals. But I kept thinking about Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor who spoke limited English and struggled to navigate social services after her husband died. I thought about the single mothers at the food bank where I volunteered, overwhelmed by paperwork and bureaucracy. My project idea was simple: create a peer support network for women over 45 navigating major life transitions, divorce, widowhood, career changes, or empty nest syndrome. I called it Second Chapter Sisters. When I presented the concept to the class, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Ashley, a straight-A student who always had perfect answers, raised her hand. "But how would you market to that demographic? They're not really on social media, are they?" I smiled, feeling confident for the first time all semester. "That's exactly why I'm the right person for this project. I know where these women are because I am one of them." Over the next month, I threw myself into the project with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I interviewed women at the grocery store, the library, my church. I connected with local community centers and discovered dozens of women hungry for connection and support, but unsure how to find it. Meanwhile, Emma watched my transformation with growing confusion. I was staying up late researching grant applications, talking passionately about social justice theories at dinner, and using words like intersectionality in casual conversation. "Who are you, and what did you do with my mother?" she asked one evening, finding me surrounded by research papers and coffee cups at 11 p.m. I looked up from my laptop, realizing I'd been so absorbed I hadn't heard her come in. "I'm becoming who I was always supposed to be, honey. I just took the long way around." The doubt in her eyes was starting to mix with something else, something that looked almost like respect. The night before our final project presentations, I got a call that changed everything. Mrs. Chen had fallen and broken her hip, and her daughter was flying in from Seattle, but wouldn't arrive until the weekend. She needed someone to help navigate the hospital system, translate medical jargon, and advocate for proper care. I didn't hesitate. I spent the entire night at the hospital, holding Mrs. Chen's hand, asking nurses the right questions, and making sure she understood what was happening to her body. By morning, I'd helped secure her a spot in the best rehabilitation facility in town and connected her daughter with resources for long-term care planning. I arrived at class exhausted, my presentation notes smudged with tears and coffee stains, but something had crystallized overnight. This wasn't just an assignment anymore. It was my calling, and I'd been living it my whole life without realizing it. When my turn came to present, I didn't use PowerPoint slides or fancy graphics. I told stories. Mrs. Chen's story, my own story, the stories of 12 other women who joined my informal support network over the past month. Social work isn't just about policies and programs, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. It's about seeing the person behind the problem, understanding that sometimes the most profound help comes from someone who's walked the same path. My professor leaned forward in his chair. My classmates, these kids I'd been so intimidated by, were completely silent, hanging on every word. In the last month, we've helped 3 women file for divorce, connected 2 with job training programs, and supported 5 others through the grief of losing their life partners. But the most important thing we did was show them they're not alone in starting over. When I finished, Marcus, the boy with the designer sneakers, raised his hand. "Sarah, this is incredible. How do we scale something like this? How do we make it bigger?" For the first time all semester, they weren't just listening to me, they were looking to me for answers. The girl they thought was too old to be there had become their teacher, and none of us had seen it coming. That evening, Emma was waiting for me when I got home, and the expression on her face was one I'd never seen before. Emma was sitting at my kitchen table when I walked in, her laptop open and surrounded by printed articles. She looked up with eyes that reminded me of her 5-year-old self, wide, curious, and slightly vulnerable. "I Googled your project," she said quietly. "Mom, there are articles about you. The university posted about Second Chapter Sisters on their website. They're calling it innovative community engagement, and they mentioned you by name." I set down my bag, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean, articles?" She turned her laptop toward me. There it was, a photo of me at the community center, surrounded by women of all ages, all of us laughing at something someone had just said. The headline read, "56-year-old student shows university the power of lived experience." "Mom, you've helped 47 women in 6 weeks," Emma said, reading from her screen. "3 local organizations want to partner with you. The mayor's office called about expanding the program citywide." She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I had no idea. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, suddenly feeling the weight of the past few months. Honestly, neither did I. I was just helping people, the way I wished someone had helped me when your father left. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. When you started school, I thought you were having some kind of midlife crisis." "I thought you were embarrassing yourself, trying to fit in with kids half your age. I thought—" She wiped her nose with her sleeve, a gesture so familiar from her childhood it made my heart ache. "I thought you'd given up on being practical." "And now?" She was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through more articles, more photos of me in action. "Now, I think I've been the child this whole time, and I never realized my mother was a badass." We both laughed through our tears, and for the first time in months, the wall between us crumbled completely. But Emma wasn't done surprising me. "I want to help," she said, closing the laptop and leaning forward. "My marketing degree, my social media skills, I want to use them for this, for you. I want to help you build something that matters." At that moment, sitting in my kitchen with my daughter looking at me like I hung the moon, I realized I hadn't just found my purpose. I'd shown her what it looked like to never give up on becoming who you're meant to be. What happened next was magic, the kind that happens when passion meets purpose and stubborn determination refuses to quit. Emma quit her startup job the following week, a decision that would have terrified me 6 months earlier, but now filled me with pride. My friends think I'm crazy, she told me as we sat in Professor Martinez's office discussing how to formalize Second Chapter Sisters as a nonprofit organization, leaving a good salary to work with my 56-year-old student mother on a project that doesn't even pay yet. And what do you think? I asked. She grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. I think I'm finally doing something that matters instead of helping rich people buy things they don't need. Professor Martinez had connected us with the university's Community Engagement Center, and suddenly we had access to resources I'd never dreamed of. Graduate students wanted to write their theses about our model. The business school offered to help us develop sustainable funding strategies. Local churches and community centers were calling to ask how they could start their own chapters. But the most incredible part was watching Emma discover her own gifts. While I connected with the women who needed support, she created systems to make that support scalable. She built a website, developed social media campaigns that actually reached our target demographic, and wrote grant proposals with a passion I'd never seen her show for anything. You know what's funny? Emma said one evening as we worked late in what had become our makeshift office in my living room. I used to think you were wasting your education on something impractical, but this is the most practical thing I've ever been part of. We're literally solving problems that exist in every community. 6 months after that first mocking laugh in my kitchen, we had chapters in 3 cities and a waiting list of communities that wanted to start their own. I was maintaining a 3.8 GPA while running what was becoming a regional movement, and Emma had found her calling in social entrepreneurship. The local news wanted to do a story about us, the mother-daughter team who'd turned a college project into a phenomenon. As we prepared for the interview, Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. Mom, I owe you an apology, not just for laughing at your dreams, but for not seeing who you really were all these years. You weren't just my mother surviving, you were a leader waiting for the right moment to emerge. The interview aired on a Thursday evening, and by Friday morning, my phone was ringing nonstop. Women from across the state wanted to know how to join or start chapters. Universities were asking me to speak at conferences. Social work organizations were inviting me to present at their annual meetings. But the call that changed everything came from an unexpected source: the State Department of Health and Human Services. Ms. Rodriguez, the voice on the other end, said, "We've been following your work with Second Chapter Sisters. We're launching a statewide initiative on aging and community support, and we'd like to discuss bringing you on as a consultant." I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? You've developed a model that's showing measurable impact on mental health outcomes, social isolation, and community engagement among women over 45. We need that expertise at the policy level. When I hung up, Emma was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, do you realize what just happened? The state government wants to hire you as a consultant. You, the woman I thought was too old to be in college. That weekend, we drove to the state capitol for meetings with officials who treated me like an expert rather than an experiment. They didn't see my gray hair or my late start. They saw results, innovation, and lived experience that no amount of traditional education could provide. Your approach challenges everything we thought we knew about community outreach to this demographic, one official told me. You're not talking at them, you're talking with them because you are them. Sitting in that conference room, being asked for my professional opinion on matters of state policy, I thought about Emma's laughter 6 months earlier. I thought about all the times I'd felt too old, too late, too ordinary to matter. The irony wasn't lost on me. By finally pursuing my dreams instead of hiding from them, I'd accidentally become exactly the kind of woman I'd always admired but never thought I could be. On the drive home, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, she said, "Mom, I need to tell you something. You're not just my greatest inspiration now. You've become the woman I want to be when I grow up, even though I'm supposedly already grown up." A year later, I walked across that graduation stage at 57 years old, summa cum laude, with Emma cheering louder than anyone in the audience. But the diploma was just paper. The real education had happened in between. Second Chapter Sisters now operated in 8 states, with Emma serving as executive director of what had become a nationally recognized nonprofit. I'd been accepted into a master's program with a full scholarship, based not on test scores, but on demonstrated impact in my community. The day after graduation, we were featured on a national morning show. The host asked Emma what it was like to work with her mother. "Honestly," Emma said, "she's taught me more about resilience, innovation, and leadership in the past year than I learned in 4 years of college. I thought I was the one with all the answers because I was young and educated, but my mom showed me that experience is education, and it's never too late to become who you're meant to be." But the moment that brought me full circle happened the following month. Emma called me, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Mom, you'll never guess what just happened. I was at coffee with my friend Jessica, the one who's been stuck in a dead-end marriage and talks about going back to school but never does. Well, she saw the article about us in that magazine, and she said something that made me cry." "What did she say?" "She said, 'If your mom can start over at 56 and become a national expert in community organizing, what's my excuse for staying miserable at 32? Mom, she enrolled in nursing school yesterday. She said you gave her permission to believe in herself again.'" I had to pull over to the side of the road because my eyes were too blurry with tears to drive safely. This was bigger than any degree or recognition or consulting contract. This was about showing other women that it's never too late to write a new chapter. That evening, Emma came over for our weekly dinner, a tradition that had evolved from obligation to genuine joy over the past year. "You know what the best part of all this is?" she said, helping me clear the dishes. "What's that?" "I finally have a mother I can brag about instead of worrying about." Today, as I write this, I'm 58 years old, completing my master's degree while running a nonprofit that's helped over 2,000 women across the country. Emma and I speak at conferences together, sharing our story of how mockery became motivation and how the courage to start over can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. Last month, we launched our book, Second Chapter Sisters, a mother-daughter guide to reinventing yourself at any age. Emma handled the business side while I shared the stories of incredible women who refused to let age or circumstances define their potential. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came last week. Emma, now 25 and thriving in her role as a social entrepreneur, called me with news. "Mom, I've been accepted to graduate school. I want to get my MSW too. I want to follow in your footsteps, the ones you started making when I thought you were walking in the wrong direction." We've created something neither of us could have imagined when she laughed at my acceptance letter that day. Not just a successful organization, but a living example that dreams don't have expiration dates, and that the courage to pursue them, no matter how old you are or who doubts you, can inspire generations. The woman who was too old for college became a nationally recognized expert in community development. The daughter who mocked her mother's dreams became her proudest collaborator and successor. And together, we've shown thousands of women that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. Every time someone tells me they're too old to start over, I share my story. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it's proof that ordinary women can do extraordinary things when they refuse to let other people's limitations become their own reality. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children isn't protecting them from seeing you fail. It's showing them what it looks like to refuse to give up on yourself, no matter what anyone else thinks, even when that anyone else is them. There are 2 more videos appearing for you. Click on one and follow another exciting story.